Imagine sitting in a luxury restaurant, enjoying a quiet meal, when suddenly a waitress explodes, yelling at Steve Harvey, jabbing her finger at his iconic mustache, and accusing him of arrogance in front of stunned guests. No one expected what happened next, and Steve's calm, classy response left the entire room speechless. You won't believe how this viral moment unfolded. It was supposed to be a calm, classy night out. Steve Harvey, beloved television host, comedian, and cultural icon, was seated at a high-end restaurant known for its elegance and exclusivity. The golden chandeliers shimmered softly overhead. Velvet chairs and marble tables filled the dining space. It was the kind of place where celebrities could dine in peace, away from flashing cameras and screaming fans. Steve looked relaxed, dressed sharply in a black tailored suit, enjoying what seemed to be a rare moment of stillness. No stage lights, no jokes to crack, just a peaceful dinner, likely with friends or family. Other diners noticed him, of course, but in a place like this, people respected boundaries. Whispers traveled table to table, but no one dared to approach. Steve Harvey was known not just for his talent, but for his dignity. He carried himself like a man who had earned respect, and most people gave it freely. But then everything changed. Without warning, a waitress stormed toward his table. She moved quickly, her steps sharp and her expression hard. At first, it looked like a simple mistake, a mix-up with a reservation, a wrong dish, maybe someone else's complaint being delivered to the wrong person. These things happen. A few diners glanced over, then looked away, assuming it would pass. But it didn't. The waitress stopped at Steve's table, leaned slightly forward, and began raising her voice. It was just loud enough that nearby diners could hear the edge in her tone. Steve looked up calmly, visibly confused. What had he done? His plate was untouched. His drink sat still, condensation trailing down the side. He hadn't even spoken to her yet. Then came the finger. She pointed directly at Steve Harvey's mustache, his unmistakable, legendary mustache, and said something that made the whole room pause. No one could catch the exact words at first, but it was clear from her body language, her tone, and the sheer force of her presence. This wasn't about food. It was personal. Is that thing supposed to be impressive? One witness later recalled her saying, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "You walk in here like you're royalty because of that mustache? You think that thing makes you special?" Gasps rippled across the room. The waitress continued, her voice growing louder with each word. "You're just a guy with facial hair and a big ego. Take it off. Maybe then you'll be a little more human." Steve sat still. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't interrupt. His face barely changed. Only his eyebrows lifted slightly. His eyes narrowed just enough to show that, while shocked, he was still processing the bizarre moment with control. By now, the entire restaurant had gone silent. Forks and knives rested on plates. Conversations had stopped mid-sentence. Phones hovered in laps, though out of respect, or perhaps fear, no one dared to openly record. But every person in that room would remember this scene. Here was one of the most respected men in entertainment, being yelled at like a misbehaving schoolboy over his mustache. And it wasn't even done. The waitress leaned in closer, pointing again, almost touching his face. "You hide behind that thing like it's a shield, like it gives you power. It doesn't. It's a joke. And so are you." The insult hung in the air. Everyone expected Steve to snap, to call the manager, to clap back with a signature one-liner that would shut the place down. But what he did instead stunned everyone. He calmly folded his napkin, placed it on the table, looked the woman in the eye, and asked, in a quiet, clear voice, "Ma'am, are you okay?" That was it. No anger, no insults, just a question that cut through the chaos like a knife through butter. The waitress blinked. For a moment, she looked thrown off, as if she hadn't expected kindness. Or maybe she realized, too late, what she'd just done. The manager came running, gently but firmly pulling her away, whispering something in her ear. She resisted at first, her face red with emotion, but eventually turned and walked toward the back. Steve sat still for a few more moments, glancing down at his plate, then up at the stunned diners around him. A faint, almost amused smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, and then he returned to his meal. That was the end of it, at least inside the restaurant. Outside, however, the story exploded. By morning, the news was everywhere. Though no video existed, eyewitness accounts lit up Twitter, TikTok, and celebrity gossip pages. Steve Harvey attacked over mustache, one headline read. Waitress loses it on comedy icon in classy restaurant, said another. Some tried to defend the waitress, saying she might have been under stress or suffering a breakdown. Others were furious, calling her behavior completely out of line and disrespectful. But across social media, one reaction was nearly universal, awe at how Steve handled it. He didn't fight fire with fire. He didn't escalate. He didn't even try to embarrass her back. Instead, he kept his cool. He asked a simple question, and in doing so, reminded everyone why he's not just a television star, but a man of character. And that mustache, it stayed right where it belonged, untouched, unbothered, and more iconic than ever. What was she yelling about? At first, no one could believe it. A waitress in a luxury 5-star restaurant, screaming at none other than Steve Harvey, one of the most respected faces in American television. And the reason? His mustache. Yes, you heard that right. Witnesses said the moment was so bizarre, so unexpected. It felt like a scene from a movie. A packed restaurant, filled with elegance, whispered conversations, the soft clinking of wine glasses, and suddenly, it's chaos. The waitress, red-faced and visibly upset, had stormed over to Steve Harvey's table without warning and began yelling at him with a rage that caught everyone off guard. According to shocked diners nearby, she accused him of being arrogant, fake, and even said he was hiding behind a ridiculous mustache like it's a crown. She didn't stop there. Her voice cut through the quiet hum of the restaurant like a siren, drawing eyes from every corner of the room. People froze mid-bite. Staff stood frozen, unsure whether to intervene. She leaned in, jabbing her finger toward his face, the tip nearly brushing his mustache, his signature look. "Take that thing off," she reportedly screamed. "You think you're better than everyone because you're famous? Because you've got a little money and a talk show? That mustache doesn't make you a king." The entire restaurant went dead silent. It was surreal. People started looking around in disbelief. Was this a prank? Was she serious? Could this really be happening to Steve Harvey in a place this upscale? Some diners instinctively reached for their phones, but they were quickly reminded of the restaurant's strict no-recording policy. Phones were technically allowed, but anyone seen openly filming would be asked to leave. That meant there was no footage, just first-hand accounts, blurry photos, and a storm of online reactions waiting to unfold. And unfold it did. Within hours of the incident, the story exploded across social media. Twitter lit up with trending hashtags like hashtag Steve Harvey mustache, hashtag waitress meltdown, and even hashtag Statch Attack. People who had been in the restaurant began sharing their versions of what happened in tweet threads and Reddit posts. "I thought it was a hidden camera show," one person tweeted. "Like, there's no way someone just went after Steve Harvey's mustache in real life." "I was 3 tables away," another wrote. "She was totally out of line. And Steve, he just sat there like a champ. Didn't even flinch." The mystery deepened as people tried to figure out who the waitress was and what pushed her to the edge. Was it personal? Did she recognize him from somewhere? Had she had a bad day and Steve's celebrity presence simply became the target? Some online users speculated she might have had a mental health breakdown. Others thought she was possibly intoxicated or under extreme stress. But what really fueled the fire was the absurdity of the reason: his mustache. Let's be clear. Steve Harvey's mustache is legendary. It's been a part of his brand for decades. Fans love it. Memes are built around it. Even people who don't watch his shows recognize the statch. So to hear that someone lashed out specifically at it, it was almost comical, if it hadn't been so uncomfortable. News outlets jumped on the story the next morning. TMZ, Daily Mail, and even some mainstream networks began running segments like Steve Harvey's mustache sparks restaurant meltdown and waitress unloads on TV host in bizarre outburst. Talk shows speculated on whether the story would have been handled differently if footage had been captured. Memes exploded across Instagram and TikTok. One viral video showed a photoshopped Steve Harvey dodging a pointing finger matrix style with the caption, "When the mustache has more patience than you." Another had a voiceover mimicking the waitress saying, "Not in MY dining room, mustache man." But behind all the jokes and internet frenzy, there was also a serious undertone. People began to discuss the growing tension between service workers and celebrities, public decorum, and the pressure restaurant staff face, especially in luxury environments where expectations are sky high. Others pointed out how social media can twist a moment into something far bigger than it was. Still, the public overwhelmingly sided with Steve, not because of who he is, but because of how he responded. Multiple eyewitnesses confirmed the same thing. He stayed calm. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't demand security. He didn't even ask for the woman to be fired. Instead, after being berated, Steve simply looked at her, tilted his head slightly, and asked, "Ma'am, are you okay?" That simple question, genuine, gentle, and completely disarming, shut everything down. Even people who didn't witness it said the moment felt iconic. One diner said, "It was like watching a masterclass in self-control." He could have embarrassed her in front of everyone. Instead, he showed compassion. The waitress, reportedly, was removed from the dining area by the manager and suspended pending internal review. Whether she returns to work remains unclear. As of now, she hasn't made a public statement, and neither has Steve. But one thing is certain. That night, Steve Harvey reminded the world that true character isn't shown on stage or in a perfectly delivered punchline. It's revealed in moments of unexpected tension, when someone's being disrespected, humiliated even, and still chooses grace. And as for the mustache, it remains untouched, unbothered, and now more iconic than ever. What made the scene even more incredible wasn't just the waitress's bizarre meltdown. It was how Steve Harvey responded. He didn't yell. He didn't stand up. He didn't look angry. In fact, he barely moved. With the entire restaurant watching, with the tension so thick it could be sliced with a butter knife, Steve simply turned his head toward the woman, looked her in the eyes, and in the calmest, most composed voice imaginable said, "Ma'am, are you okay?" That's it. 7 words. No threats. No accusations. Just a simple, honest question that changed the entire atmosphere of the room. And just like that, the power shifted. The woman, who had been raging seconds earlier, seemed momentarily stunned. For a brief instant, the fire in her eyes dimmed. Her body language faltered. She blinked, taken aback, as if she suddenly realized everyone was staring, and that she had crossed a line. A very public, very uncomfortable line. The silence that followed was louder than her outburst. Guests across the restaurant stared in disbelief. Some shook their heads. Others exchanged glances of shock and confusion. One guest, seated just a few feet away, later told reporters, he was cool as ice, didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice. He just let her scream and stayed calm. Another said, honestly, it made her look even worse. He kept his dignity, and she just kept unraveling. It was like watching someone try to pick a fight with a statue. People couldn't believe it. In an age where celebrity confrontations often go viral for all the wrong reasons, shouting matches, lawsuits, social media wars, Steve Harvey showed a different side of fame, a different kind of power. He didn't need to clap back. He didn't need to prove anything. His silence, his poise, said more than any argument ever could. Even the restaurant staff were visibly shaken. The maitre d' stood frozen near the bar, clearly unsure of how to step in. The bartender paused mid-pour. The entire waitstaff seemed paralyzed by the sheer absurdity of the situation. And then came the manager, a sharply dressed man in his 40s, moving quickly but professionally, approached the table and gently placed a hand on the waitress's shoulder. His face was tight with tension. He didn't shout or scold. He simply leaned in and spoke quietly to her. No one could hear what was said, but the message was clear. The waitress, still breathing heavily, looked around at the sea of eyes locked onto her. The reality seemed to hit her all at once. Her face turned red. She muttered something under her breath, then allowed herself to be led away from the table, disappearing behind the kitchen doors. According to sources later that evening, she was suspended on the spot pending further review. Whether she would return to her job was unclear. Some speculated it wasn't her first outburst. Others wondered if she had personal issues boiling beneath the surface. But at that moment, one thing was obvious. Her breakdown had become national news. And Steve Harvey simply adjusted his suit jacket, unfolded his napkin again, and continued with his meal. He didn't call for the manager. He didn't demand compensation. He didn't post about it online or use it as a platform to shame anyone. He just sat there, composed, grounded, and utterly unshaken. When the dessert menu arrived, he smiled politely. When a different server came to refill his glass, he thanked them with warmth. And when he finally stood up to leave, he shook the hands of 3 staff members, gave a quiet nod to the manager, and walked out without a trace of drama. He left with class. That alone spoke volumes. In an age where so many celebrities are quick to react, Steve Harvey showed restraint. In a moment where others might lash out or explode, he chose compassion. He chose grace. And the internet noticed. Within hours of the incident, the story had spread. Witnesses' tweets were going viral. Steve Harvey just gave a masterclass in handling public humiliation. One user wrote, "He stayed calm, asked the right question, and left like a boss." Others chimed in with support. Legend behavior. This is why Steve Harvey is a different breed. He made her look ridiculous without saying a single insulting word. The phrase, "Ma'am, are you okay?" began trending. People used it as a meme, a quote, even a symbol of how to deal with conflict in a mature, composed way. TikTok creators made reenactments. Podcasts discussed it as a case study in emotional intelligence. And through all the noise, Steve Harvey said nothing. No tweets, no interviews, no follow-up comments. He let the moment speak for itself. In the days that followed, some outlets speculated that the waitress had personal issues or unresolved anger. A few even tried to frame the situation as a misunderstanding. But it didn't change what people had seen. They had watched someone in power stay calm under pressure and watched someone else spiral. And that's what made it unforgettable. It wasn't just about a mustache. It wasn't even about fame. It was about character. In a room full of people with eyes fixed on him, Steve Harvey didn't perform. He didn't try to win. He just stayed true to himself. And sometimes, that's the most powerful thing you can do. Once the story hit the internet, it took on a life of its own. What began as a strange, uncomfortable moment in a quiet luxury restaurant quickly became a national conversation, fueled by shock, humor, sympathy, and, of course, the undeniable power of Steve Harvey's mustache. As witness accounts spread across Twitter, Reddit, and Instagram, it wasn't long before the hashtag started trending. Hashtag Steve Harvey mustache. Hashtag restaurant meltdown. Hashtag grace under pressure. People online were fascinated, not just by the absurdity of the situation, but by the way it seemed to tap into something deeper. Was the waitress dealing with a personal grudge? Had something about Steve's appearance triggered a long-held resentment? Or had she simply snapped under pressure, caught in a moment she couldn't control? Twitter users debated fiercely. Some speculated that the waitress may have mistaken Steve for someone else entirely. She must have thought he was her ex, one user joked. Others took a more serious tone, suggesting that the outburst could have stemmed from deeper emotional struggles, mental stress, burnout, frustration with the service industry, or even a long-simmering disdain for celebrity culture. But amid the chaos of hot takes and opinion threads, one thing stood out: the overwhelming praise for how Steve Harvey handled it. He handled it like a pro. One tweet read, "That's how a real man carries himself." "He made her look like the unstable one just by staying silent," said another. The admiration rolled in from all corners of the internet. Fan pages posted tributes, video edits, and even animated reenactments of the now infamous mustache moment. On TikTok, creators recreated the scene with sound effects and dramatic music, portraying Steve as the unshakable hero in a storm of drama. One video, which racked up over 2 million views in 24 hours, showed an actor dressed like Steve Harvey calmly sipping wine while chaos erupted in the background. The caption read, "When your mustache causes more drama than your whole career." Even fellow celebrities got in on the trend. Several posted throwback photos of Steve's iconic mustache with captions like, "Too powerful to handle," The stat stays. Steve wins, no words needed. But while most of the internet was busy turning the moment into a meme-worthy legend, not everyone was laughing. Some users voiced concern and criticism, not of Steve, but of how the restaurant handled the situation. How did she even get to that point without a manager stepping in sooner? Asked one commenter. That kind of behavior shouldn't happen in a place that charges $80 for a salad. Others raised questions about transparency. Why hasn't the restaurant released a statement? People asked. Where's the security footage? The strict no-recording policy at the establishment meant there were no official videos, just diner accounts and retellings, which some skeptics found hard to believe. Meanwhile, a quieter but growing portion of the conversation turned toward the waitress herself. Some argued she deserved to be fired immediately. You can't scream at guests like that, especially someone like Steve Harvey, said one reply. But others took a different stance. What if she wasn't just angry, but unwell? A few claimed she might have had a mental health episode and needed help, not punishment. We talk so much about mental health, but the second someone breaks down in public, we call for them to be fired, wrote one user. That's not fair. Mental health advocates joined in, reminding people that stress in the hospitality industry often goes unnoticed and untreated. They pointed out that explosive moments like this, while unacceptable, might also be warning signs that someone is suffering quietly behind the scenes. Still, the restaurant confirmed, through anonymous sources, that the waitress had been suspended immediately pending an internal review. As of now, her identity has not been revealed publicly, and no official statement has been released by either her or her employer. As for Steve, he hasn't said a single word. No Instagram post, no tweet, no interview, not even a mention on his talk show. That silence, to many, speaks volumes. He didn't need to capitalize on the moment. He didn't need to turn it into a headline. Instead, he did what most people in his position rarely do. He let his actions speak louder than any statement ever could. And it's exactly that response, measured, calm, dignified, that kept the internet on his side. In an age where everyone's quick to react, Steve Harvey stayed rooted. In a world obsessed with clapbacks, he gave compassion. And in a public space where his ego could have easily taken over, he kept it cool. The story, in its most unexpected way, became a lesson. It was about respect, about patience, about not fighting chaos with more chaos. And maybe, most of all, it reminded people that sometimes the loudest voice in the room is no match for quiet strength. The waitress may have lost her temper. The restaurant may have lost its composure. But Steve Harvey, he didn't lose anything. If anything, he gained more respect than ever. And the mustache? Still perfect, still iconic, and now legendary for a whole new reason. What makes this story more than just another viral moment is what it represents on a much deeper level. At face value, yes, it's about a celebrity getting yelled at in public, a waitress snapping over something as harmless as facial hair, a high-end restaurant witnessing a meltdown in front of stunned guests. But beneath the surface, this moment tapped into something far more meaningful, something that resonated with people far beyond the velvet-draped walls of that luxury dining room. Because Steve Harvey's mustache isn't just facial hair. It's a symbol. It represents confidence, legacy, uniqueness. It's been a part of Steve's image for decades. The mustache has been there through game shows, comedy tours, talk shows, inspirational speeches, you name it. It's instantly recognizable, even iconic. Some fans say they can't picture Steve without it. It's more than a style choice, it's a statement. And maybe that's why the attack felt so personal, even to people watching from afar. When someone lashes out at what makes you unique, what makes you you, it hits differently. Whether you're a celebrity or not, there's something universally upsetting about being targeted for simply being yourself. So, for Steve Harvey to be mocked in public, for his appearance, for his presence, for something so intertwined with his identity, and to remain calm in that moment, that's not just admirable, it's powerful. He could have reacted. He could have raised his voice. He could have stood up and called security, demanded the woman be thrown out, maybe even press charges. But he didn't. Instead, he asked a simple question. "Ma'am, are you okay?" That moment, quiet but piercing, changed everything. And the world noticed. Since the incident, Steve has stayed silent on social media. No tweet, no post, no interview clip, but sources close to him say he's doing just fine. In fact, he reportedly told friends he has no interest in dragging the woman through the media or escalating the situation. He believes she was clearly under stress, possibly even in emotional pain, and he has no desire to kick someone when they're down. That right there, that's a level of empathy and class that's all too rare, especially in today's world of instant reactions and public shaming. Still, while Steve may be moving on, the public can't seem to let go just yet. The image of a furious waitress jabbing her finger towards Steve Harvey's mustache while diners stare in stunned silence is now burned into pop culture. It's been immortalized in memes, cartoon sketches, TikTok reenactments, and even fan art. Some show the mustache dodging attacks like it's a superhero. Others frame it like a monument that stood tall under fire. But the deeper message behind it all? That's what really stuck. Because this wasn't just about a waitress losing her temper. It wasn't just about a celebrity being embarrassed. It was a reflection of something bigger. How people handle pressure, how they treat others, and how grace can diffuse chaos better than aggression ever could. It reminded people that no matter how rich, famous, or respected you are, you're never immune to confrontation. Anyone can become the target of someone else's frustration, anger, or pain. But how you respond, that's what defines you. Steve's response was a masterclass in poise, professionalism, and emotional intelligence. One guest who witnessed the moment later said, "He didn't just de-escalate the situation, he made her look small without ever raising his voice. That's real strength." Another diner remarked, "I went in thinking I'd eat steak next to celebrities. I left with a story about integrity." Even commentators and public figures weighed in. One popular life coach shared a clip discussing the event and said, "This is what self-control looks like." Steve Harvey could teach a seminar based on that one moment. Meanwhile, debates still swirl around the waitress. Was she mentally unwell? Overworked? Dealing with a personal crisis? The restaurant has yet to release a full statement, and her identity remains undisclosed. What we do know is that she was immediately suspended pending review, and it's unclear whether she'll return to work. Some people remain sympathetic, arguing that she clearly needed help, not just punishment. Others insist that regardless of stress or emotional state, no one deserves to be treated the way she treated Steve. But through all the noise, one message continues to rise above the rest. Steve Harvey didn't just sit through a confrontation. He led by example. He didn't play the victim. He didn't grandstand. He didn't post about teaching a lesson. He just showed restraint, empathy, and a calm that commanded more respect than any shouting match ever could. And that's what people will remember. Because years from now, when this moment is long gone from headlines and hashtag lists, the takeaway won't be about a waitress who lost her cool. It'll be about a man who kept his. And yes, the mustache, still flawless, still untouchable, and now more legendary than ever. Steve Harvey showed us that true strength isn't loud, it's calm, composed, and confident, even when the world's watching. If you found this story as unbelievable as we did, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more jaw-dropping celebrity moments, and share this video with someone who needs a lesson in grace under pressure. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.